Happy holidays. Big game breakdown. I'm looking at one of the semifinal games, Washington and Texas. Now, while I believe Washington is a fake team, I don't even have them as one of the four best teams. They obviously deserve to be here being undefeated. But I'm going to look at the total here. Total 63 or 63 and a half. When I went to the database, bowl totals of 58 and a half and higher since 2014 have hit 57.3%. When I look at pace of play, these teams combined for over 140 offensive plays per game versus winning FBS teams and away from home. That ranks in the top 8 for both categories among all the bowl games. I look at Washington's offense, number 11 in yards per game in offense relative to what their opponents allow, while their defense is number 83 away from home. They actually allow their opponent more yards than they average against other foes. And when you look at Washington, take a look. Arizona State, they got outgained by 53 yards. Stanford, they got outgained. Oregon State, they got outgained. Washington State, they got outgained. Their defense does give up a lot of yards. In fact, almost 400 yards per game and 22.6 first downs per game. But the matchup is part of the reason I'm on this. The Texas Longhorns have maybe the best, they do have the best pair of defensive tackles in all of college football. And in fact, Pro Football Focus has their defensive tackles as the number 1 and number 2 tackles in college football. The problem is this: Washington doesn't run. They average 125 yards per carry, but we know with Penix and his 33.9 touchdown to interception ratio, they want to run the ball. When Washington has the ball on offense, they do not give up sacks. They're number 5 in the number of sacks per game allowed. But when they're on the defensive side, they don't get pressure. They're number 122 in defensive sacks per game. This Texas offense will be able to move the ball. They are a run-based offense. 54% of their plays are run plays versus pass plays. But when you can run for 200 yards per game, 4.9 yards per carry, guess what? They've allowed each of those 4 opponents to gain over 500 yards on the season. Washington, to me, will be able to pass against Texas. Texas allowing 63% the last 4 weeks in pass completions. Texas will be able to move the ball, either running or passing against Washington. Get it done here. I'm going over the total for this nightcap in the college football playoffs.
Let's take a look at one of the bigger matchups remaining in college football bowl action. Mississippi and Penn State playing in Atlanta. The Rebels have only lost 2 games all season to Alabama and Georgia. The Tide are in the Final Four, obviously, while the Bulldogs are still traded power in college football, not only by my margins, but by just about everybody I know who gambles for a living. Both of those games were true road contests. While not what you would call an elite team, the Rebels are a clear top 20 club. I've got them, I believe, ranked 14th on the season. So the future looks really bright for Ole Miss, especially when you take a look at their recruiting rankings. This is a team who could compete next year for the championship in the SEC. Penn State is known to be beat up on weaker teams, and they did a lot of that this season. But they struggled when they step up in class. The 2 losses this season were to Ohio State and Michigan, the 2 best teams in that conference. The offense has been pretty steady all season, very good, but it's the Nittany Lions defense that has been dominant. Penn State only allows 2.16 yards per carry on the season. Defensive coordinator Manny Diaz took the Duke job, but this defense is still in fine shape. That said, I am concerned about Penn State and their turnover margin. Plus 18 turnovers on the season. That's somewhat unheard of. And for them to play a team as good as a mid-range or upper mid-range SEC team, I don't think that's going to continue. They got most of their turnovers were against very poor teams in the Big Ten, and there were some teams out of that conference that just didn't have any offense at all. So I think I got to throw some of that out here with Penn State. I know the coach knows what the line is in these games, so it's always tough going against Penn State in that regard. But Mississippi's coach also talks about the point spread on a regular basis. So both teams know what the line is, and they'll do their best to try to cover that spread. So we're going to take a look at Mississippi here. I think the line is fair where it's at right now. Penn State's a little bit overrated, in my opinion. Look for a really good team, really good game here on New Year's Day. We'll take Mississippi plus the points here against Penn State.
Steve Merrill back here breaking down a New Year's Day bowl game for you. It's the first one, so don't oversleep at the beginning of the new year. This one kicks off early at 12 noon Eastern on Monday, January the 1st on ESPN2 on the Deuce, the ReliaQuest Bowl. And you might say, what bowl is this? Well, it's the second year they've had it, but keep in mind, this used to be the Outback Bowl. It's in Tampa, Florida. In fact, the Outback Bowl was played for 27 straight years, from 96 to 2022. Parent company of the Outback Steakhouse decided not to continue the sponsorship, but it actually goes down as the longest continuous bowl sponsorship in bowl history, those 27 straight bowl games. So this is the former Outback Bowl, now called the ReliaQuest Bowl. And it's an interesting matchup here between Big Ten and SEC, Wisconsin and LSU. And of course, opt-outs, that's what we have to look at in every bowl game nowadays. And there's a pretty big one, maybe the biggest one of the bowl season. That's because the Heisman Trophy winner will not be playing in this game. LSU will be without their star quarterback, Jayden Daniels, who had just a fantastic season, 40 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. Garrett Nussmeier will be the backup quarterback getting the start here. He only threw 33 pass attempts the entire season, averaged a paltry 5.9 yards per pass compared to Daniels, who averaged 11.5 yards per pass. So obviously a huge downgrade here. LSU is also going to be without some key receivers, other parts on both offense and defense. Wisconsin as well will be missing some guys, but I don't think the opt-outs are quite as heavy here for the Badgers. And this is a pretty big point spread, currently 10 across the board, totals around 56. I think the under makes some sense here, especially with that potent LSU offense missing so much star power. The concern, of course, though, is that LSU couldn't stop anybody this season. They gave up 39 points per game on the road, over 7 yards per play away from home. So I do think Wisconsin will have some success running the ball, but Wisconsin did not throw the ball well at all this season, one of the worst passing attacks in the country. In fact, had Iowa not been in the Big Ten with them, they would have been the worst passing team in the Big Ten. But when the Iowa Hawkeyes are in your conference, you're always going to be a little bit better. Iowa averaged 5 yards per pass. Wisconsin averaged just 5.8 against teams that gave up 6.7. LSU on the season allowed 7.7 yards per pass, but they faced some really tough SEC opponents, and their opponents averaged 7.7. So this is nearly a 2 yard per pass downgrade in the level of competition. So I think the under 56 makes sense here. Yes, LSU is questionable on defense, but I'm not sure Wisconsin can take full advantage. They're going to have to run the ball, keep the clock moving. I think LSU will look to run the ball too, rely on that offense that averaged over 6 yards per carry. Take a look at under 56 in the ReliaQuest Bowl early Monday, January 1st, New Year's Day at 12 noon Eastern.
Let's start off this segment with a quiz. If a bowl game has a spread of 9.5 or higher, what do you think the over-under percentage is since 2019? This is Ralph Michaels. I am breaking down Liberty and Oregon, a New Year's Day bowl, and let's get to that answer. Since 2019, when you have a spread of 9.5 or more, the over has hit 76% of the time. In my first video, I talked about bowl totals of 58.5 and higher, hitting 57.3%. This bowl total, a little higher than that, it's 67, and I am going to go over the total. Now, we've seen a lot of upsets in these group of 5 versus power 5 teams. Oregon obviously has a bubble burst. You went to Washington, you lost, you were still in it. You played Washington again in Las Vegas. You got outgained by 118 yards, and now you're relegated to play Liberty. But when I break down these opponents, you have the number 2 and number 3 scoring offenses in the country. You have the number 1 and number 4 scoring offenses away from home. You have the number 5 and number 9 scoring offenses against winning FBS teams. The O-lines are number 1 and number 2 in sacks per game allowed. And guess what? They don't get pressure. Defensive sacks per allowed 102 for Liberty, 55 for Oregon. So both teams protect their quarterbacks. Both teams do not get sacks. Horrible at getting pressure. So the question is this. The Liberty offense has averaged 535 yards per game, 25.6 first downs per game, but they've played nobody. There are 133 teams in the FBS. Liberty has played the number 134th schedule. What does that mean? Well, that means that FCS teams have played tougher schedules than Liberty has. But I still think Liberty, with their offense, can move the ball against Oregon. It's tough when you're a team like Oregon, a huge favorite like they are, for the defense to play with the intensity they need. There's a lot of opt-outs for Oregons on both the offensive and defensive side, but the important piece is Nix. Bo Nix is going to play. Bo Nix, with his 40-3 touchdown to interception ratio, 77% completions, 6 rushing touchdowns. For Salter and Liberty, every offensive starter is going to play, and they're going to be missing 4 defensive starters. So while the defense has given up significant yards to the best offenses they've played, this leaps and bounds the best offense they have faced. I put it together, and I think 67 is a fair number for this to reach. Oregon, I expect to get into the 40s. I need 20 plus for Liberty. I think they do get this as well. Bo Nix goes out with a bang. Liberty, proud to be here. They're excited. And again, with Bo Nix playing, I think that gets the entire offensive unit excited for the Oregon Ducks. My best bet is Oregon and Liberty over the total. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'd like to wish each and every one of you a very happy and safe New Year's holiday.
I'm going to take a look at the same game my colleague Rolf had talked about, and that's a Liberty-Oregon game, but I'm looking at it in a little bit different way in this game. Liberty and Oregon are playing in Glendale, Arizona, a fast track. He had the over in this game, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a high-scoring game. The line tells you that. But I think we've got an advantage in here that's a little bit bigger than the total, and that's the side. The Flames are undefeated on the season at 13-0 coming out of Conference USA. But this is by far the best test they've had this season. The highest ranked team they played this year was Jacksonville State, who finished 80th in our power rankings. That tells you how weak of a schedule that Liberty had. They dominated on the ground this year, averaging over 6 yards per carry, 6.13 yards per carry in the passing game, has a 31-5 touchdown to interception ratio. But once again, that strength of schedule, one of the weakest in the country, if not the weakest. The only team to beat Oregon this year was Washington. They did it twice by 3 points each time. This offense has been dominant all year, scoring 31 points or more in every game all season long. The Ducks have a 44-5 touchdown to interception ratio on the season. And this was the club right there with other elite teams in the country that thought they had a chance to play in the Final Four. I actually have them at number 4 in my power ratings to end the season. So this is one of the elite teams playing a team that had a lot of success against very bad opponents. On one hand, Liberty's excited to be here, while Oregon has to be a bit disappointed with the opponent here. But on the other hand, the Ducks have pounded lesser competition in the past. So it all comes down to motivation for Oregon. Since Bo Nix is participating in this game, we can assume the rest of the team wants to go out on a positive also. It's a good leadership quality to have. And for him to come out and play in this game with any type of pro career in his future, got to give him credit for that. And I think that helps the entire Oregon team in this regard. So give me Oregon minus the 16.5 here over Liberty. The team will put some points on the board, but I see Oregon scoring on virtually every possession here. Give me Oregon minus the points.
Steve Merrill back with the best bet for the show here. New Year's Day, January 1st. Happy New Year's. Let's start 2024 off with an over-under winner, and that's under, as you see on the screen here, under 35.5 between Iowa and Tennessee. But I want to give you some reasoning for this selection. First of all, 85% angle this year with Iowa in the under. They went 11-2 under in their 13 games, and some historically low totals, to say the least. And this is another one, but don't let it scare you off because every one of those games has gone under. Let's backtrack a month ago. The Big Ten championship game was the lowest conference championship game total ever in college football history at 35. That Michigan-Iowa game landed 26-0, stayed under the total. And then, of course, the previous month in November, 2 of Iowa's final 3 games of the regular season had historically low totals. In fact, the 2 lowest totals ever in the history of college football. We had the Rutgers game under 27.5, landed 22-0. And then a few weeks later, the regular season finale was the lowest total we've ever seen in college football. The Nebraska game, an over-under of 25, landed 13-10 and stayed under that total as well. In fact, going back last season, Iowa is now on a 15-3 under run their last 18 games. And one of those was a total of just 31.5 in their bowl game last year against Kentucky, which stayed under and was a 21-0 game. So Iowa continuously stays under these low totals, and it's not a surprise why. They are a terrible offense, but a very good defense. It's the perfect recipe for unders, and it'll play out again here. Now, Tennessee is missing some key players. Their starting quarterback is opted out for the NFL draft, Milton. He will not play. That'll hurt the Tennessee offense, which is very decent passing attack, and then they're going to be a downgraded to a below-average passing attack now, especially against an Iowa defense that gives up just 5 yards per pass this year against teams that average 6.8. Meanwhile, Tennessee does run the ball well, but Iowa defends the run well, 3 yards per carry allowed. And to put those defensive numbers in check, just 13 points allowed, just 4 yards per play, is even more impressive considering how bad the Iowa offense was and how many bad situations they put the Iowa defense in. They still outperformed, giving up just 4 yards per play and only 13 points a game. I look for both teams to struggle moving the ball in this game offensively, and that'll lead to a low-scoring game rather. And don't let the low total scare you. I just gave you reasons why the low Iowa numbers stay under. And Ralph Michaels, my colleague at wagertalk.com, and I have talked about this in numerous sports on numerous shows over the years, that the lowest totals stay under and the highest totals go over. And I had Ralph run it for me real quick, the recent bowl games. In fact, to put this in perspective, we've only had 3 bowl games over the last decade. In fact, the last decade plus that have had totals this low. In fact, if you look at it at 37 or less, very uncharted territory. In fact, this is the only game other than that one I mentioned last year. And this is a situation, once again, just 3 games in the last decade have been 38.5 or less. And guess what? All 3 of those stayed under by double-digit margins. So we'll take the under once again in the Iowa Hawkeyes, a situation that's gone 11-2 this year. Let's look for it to go 12-2 after this bowl game on January 1st. And don't forget, if you want my official bowl best bets, I have 5 of them. 5 strong January 1st New Year's Day bowl best bets, including both national semifinal games between Alabama, Michigan, Texas, Washington. Get all 5 best bets, a 5-for-1 special for New Year's Day. They're up nice and early right now. Steve Merrill, wagertalk.com. Or if you want to have a good New Year's resolution and make money all year long, consider a 1-year all access and save $800 instantly with promo code SM365. Works out to just over $3 a day for every football, baseball, and basketball play for the next 365 days and nights. Full details along with daily free plays and those promo codes on my page right now, Steve Merrill, wagertalk.com.